by Ahead of the Curve and its partner organization, Reimagine Group. And this series was named by one of my colleagues, Salma Sayah. It's called Reimagining Life. It's to really explore how different sectors will be responding to the COVID crisis and what the world will look like post when we hopefully do emerge from this global crisis in the future. Who knows when that future will be. But I really wanted to thank you all. We're starting this first webinar looking at food security and agriculture. And for those who don't know me, my name is Dina H.Sherif. I'm a co-founder of Ahead of the Curve. I'm also executive director of the Legatum Center for Development and Entrepreneurship at MIT. And I have a wonderful group of panelists here with us today who work in agriculture and food security. I want to ask each of you to quickly introduce yourselves, but before doing that, I just wanted to thank everyone who joined the conversation. Please type in any questions that you may have or comments in the chat box or the Q&A box as we go along. I'll be reading them and I'll be selecting questions to ask to the group as we move along. So I'm just going to move in the direction of the people that I see in front of me. Mohsen, would you quickly introduce yourself to the audience?
Hello, everyone. I'm Mohsen Sarhan. I'm the CEO of the Egyptian Food Bank. We're the nation's food bank serving people in extreme and ultra poverty lines for the past 15 years.
Khaled?
Hello, everyone. My name is Khaled Anani. I'm the vice chairman of Dakahlia Group. We are a family-owned agricultural group that works in the poultry value chain, starting with breeders all the way till processing, as well as agricultural production and export.
Hesham?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Hesham Naggar. I'm the CEO of Daltex Group, which is an agriculture company, family-owned business in the last 60 years in the export of fresh fruits and vegetables, growing and exporting it to different parts of the world. I'm also the deputy chairman of the Egyptian Agriculture Council, as well as the board member in Nahia, which is an NGO for export improvement of the agriculture sector in Egypt. Thank you.
Abeer?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Abeer Etefa. I'm the senior spokeswoman and the head of communications for the United Nations World Food Programme for the Middle East, North Africa, Central Asia, and East Europe Bureau. And the United Nations World Food Programme is the largest UN organization fighting hunger, saving lives, changing lives, mandated with ensuring that no person goes to bed hungry. On annual basis, we assist around 100 million people in 80 countries around the world. And I'm so happy to be with this esteemed panel and with you, Dina. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Abeer. Ndidi, who is joining us from Nigeria, very excited to have you. Can you quickly introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Ndidi Nwuneli. I'm a social entrepreneur. I live in Lagos, Nigeria. I'm the co-founder of Ace Foods. We process spices and complementary food. I'm the managing partner of Sahel Capital, which works across Africa. And we've just started Nourishing Africa, which is a hub for 1 million entrepreneurs. Delighted to be on this call.
Thank you. So wonderful to have all of you. Again, to the audience, please write your questions in the chat box. You know, it's interesting because there are so many sectors that will be disrupted as a result of COVID-19. And I think across the board, we're seeing lots of rapid shifts happening. But food and agriculture, this is an essential thing to everyone's life, right? So Abeer, I really wanted to start with you because I would love for you to start us off by giving us an overview of where we are in the Middle East and Africa when it comes to food security, and what are some of the challenges that we have had, but that are now being compounded by the global crisis.
Thank you, Dina. Let me start by saying one sentence that resonated with me today. The head of the United Nations World Food Program was briefing the Security Council this afternoon, and he said something that really alarmed me a lot. He said we could be facing famines of biblical proportions within a short few months. And he said that the truth is that we don't have time on our side. The economic impact of this pandemic is potentially catastrophic for millions who are already hanging by a thread. And it's a blow for millions of more who can only eat if they earn a wage. The lockdowns, the global economic recession have already pushed people's nest eggs, and it will only take one more shock like COVID-19 to push them over the edge, and we therefore must collectively act now to mitigate the impact of this global catastrophe. If you want to look a little bit at numbers, we have a report that came out today, which is basically putting out some scary numbers. The report looks at the number of food insecure people, the severely food insecure people. I mean, this is the nice term of saying very hungry people. This number in 2019 was around 130 million. Now the projection is by the end of 2020, we could be looking at 250 million of people suffering from severe food insecurity. That's basically the number has doubled. So 250 million people. I mean, this is really huge, and the magnitude of this is beyond imagination. Now, if you want to look at the region, there's quite a lot of these numbers in the region. As a matter of fact, if you look at the top numbers, we're looking here at Yemen, at Sudan, at Syria, at the countries that are hosting refugees that will be impacted. So just giving you few numbers, and I don't want to confuse the audience with so many numbers, but I can tell you that the concern is the highest for countries across Africa and the Middle East, because the virus is affecting the lives and the livelihoods and all the trading networks. In terms of the facts and figures, 7 countries, that's South Sudan, Yemen, Central African Republic, Zimbabwe, Afghanistan, Syrian Arab Republic, and Haiti stand out as major food crises in 2019, with more than 35% of their population basically analyzing crisis or worse in our food security analysis. So we're talking here about a huge impact that will be landing specifically on this region, and that's on the fragile communities, without even going into ones that were stable and now are being pushed to the edge because of the crisis.
Abeer, does the World Food Program have any kind of insight into how many people who were in that stable place who will now become more insecure, of this percentage of the populations in the Middle East?
In terms of the percentage of the population in the Middle East, we don't yet have this exact, because this is a developing situation. The projection is that by the end of 2020, we'll have 250 million people across the world. Now, how much of them is in the region? I think it's going to be around half. If you just look at the figures that we have, we assist 12 million people in Yemen, around 4 million people in Syria, around 3 million for refugees in neighboring countries, and half of WFP operations worldwide happen to be in this part of the world. So the impact, if you kind of put the analysis together, the impact will be huge on this region. I would say that we are looking at double the number of the food insecure people at the moment here.
So just very quickly, I wanna hop over to Ndidi, because she has an interesting lens on Africa as a whole, and Ndidi, there's some pretty striking numbers also about Africa. Across the world, there are around 821 million undernourished people. 257 million of those people are actually in Africa. Of that number, 237 million are in sub-Saharan Africa. What are you seeing from where you are in Nigeria, and sub-Saharan Africa more broadly with regards to food security. And I know what is an incredible priority to see the agriculture sector grow, particularly at this time. And I know that you've gone to incredible lengths to encourage entrepreneurship in Africa.
Thank you very much, Dina. So we're facing almost 3 different shocks at the same time, or 4. The first is the locust invasion in East Africa, which the World Bank estimates is going to lead to losses of about $8 billion. And this is confronting a whole range of countries. We're also facing the climate change shocks, which we know have led to drought in about 4 African countries, and the WFP has been quite active in Zimbabwe, I know for a fact, and Malawi. And then we're dealing with COVID-19, and we're dealing with the major currency devaluations.
So Africa really didn't need COVID-19, right?
With the oil shocks, many of our countries, as you know, Nigeria in particular, Angola, very dependent on oil. And with what's happening, we're seeing devaluation. We're also seeing with COVID-19, 20 to 30% unemployment already happening because of companies either shutting down for short term or shutting down, and remittances being reduced significantly across Africa because their brothers and sisters abroad are also facing the same shocks. And so what this has led to is increases in food prices, and the lockdowns are not helping with the restrictions and movements across countries, within countries, which is affecting fertilizer and seed distribution and produce getting from the farm to the markets. So this is really, really a difficult time for agriculture. And what we're worried about is not just today, it's because we're entering the planting season in many countries. If we continue to have restrictions of inputs to the farm, this is going to lead to future shocks and future deepening of malnutrition in 6 months from now when it's time for harvest, or 4 to 6 months from now. So there is a crisis, but I don't think it's all bad news. I think we needed to have this rude awakening because many of our ecosystems are extremely fragile, and we haven't recognized how important the food ecosystems are to our well-being. And what makes us, why this is a good moment for us if we actually learn the lessons, is because we're naturally endowed for agricultural excellence. There's no reason why Africa shouldn't be feeding itself and the world. And so what I'm hoping will come out of this is a lot more ecosystem building, a lot more collaboration between partners, data sharing, information sharing, and collaborations with private sector organizations stepping up and saying, what can we do together to ensure that we're ready for the next shock, and we're ready to basically develop homegrown solutions that can ensure that in future we're much stronger.
So let me go back and ask both you and Abeer one question. We have 2 representatives from the private sector in this group. We have Khaled and Hesham, who are leading 2 fairly large agriculture companies that are very much exporting products to the rest of the world. Abeer, maybe I can start with you. What would you want from the private sector at this critical time? How would you want the private sector to support food security within the Middle East and Africa? What kind of role do you think they should be playing? And then Ndidi, I would like to follow up with you and say, what role should the already established private sector in these large companies be playing to really support this ecosystem that you're talking about? Abeer?
Thank you, Dina. I think if we can look at the bigger picture of the Sustainable Development Goal number 2. So the Sustainable Development Goals, they are 17. The second one is zero hunger. But the most important goal of all of these is 17, which is basically we do it in partnership. And that's in partnership with everyone. It's the private sector, it's the governments, it's the UN, it's local NGOs, it's like the Egyptian Food Bank, the private sector. Everyone has a role to play in zero hunger. It's not just one organization that can do it in their own. So what is the role of private sector now? I think, while I haven't really thought well about this question, what comes immediately to my mind is support to local farmers, support to the smallholder farmers, because they are the number one producers of food, but they are also extremely vulnerable. And in many cases, those who feed us are the ones who also are subject the most to food insecurity. So I think that the thing that comes immediately to my mind is the support to this local industry of food production, to smallholder farmers, to the most, especially those ones who have been really affected in a very negative way by border closures, by the lockdowns, because most of these food commodities and food products are perishable goods. So if they don't get moving from one point to the other at a certain time, they get wasted.
Right. And Ndidi?
Yeah, just to follow up, I would say there are three main things that organized private sector should be doing. Number one is really partnering with each other to come up with a cohesive strategy to ensure that the food ecosystem continues to thrive. It's everybody's
Did you say you want
turning.
the private sector to partner with each other?
Yes, definitely.
I want to make sure I heard you correctly.
Even where there's competition, I always tell people, leave your egos and logos at the door, because we are suffering together, so we need to partner. We have to partner across some dimensions. I talked about rising food prices. Now, some of the large companies are the ones who are driving some of this rising food prices. And I think they have to rise up to this citizenship and say, let's put the needs of our people ahead of us. So let's collaborate. Let's see what systems and structures we need to build. Let's actually support all the suppliers that are SMEs in our value chain to ensure that they also keep alive. And let's see how we can work to shape policy in the best interest of our people, not even our own company's best interest. I know it's often difficult. Number two, the second thing is that we need a lot more shared corporate values from our large companies, where you're thinking about strategic interventions in your area of influence. I've seen companies say, we make palm oil, we're going to start making soap. We're going to add hand sanitizers to our production line. We're going to think about what is needed right now and what we can leverage for the good of society. And the third is, a lot of companies need to strengthen their ecosystems and be more inclusive. And this, I'm challenging them around how they engage female farmers in their value chains, how they track what's happening in their value chains to secure their supply and their distribution channels, ensuring that it's inclusive. Now, if I wanted to add a final thing, 50% of the SMEs in our hub have either shut down temporarily or actually wondering if they can survive post-COVID. And so there's going to be an urgent need for new business models, and where we're thinking about price points for nutritious food and how to be innovative so we can actually provide nutritious food at affordable rates for the masses of people, how we engage digital and use digital solutions, how we share data. So we're having to think about new business models. And I think the large companies are well placed because of their supply distribution models to engage SMEs in that rethink so that we can build a viable and sustainable resilient ecosystem.
Yeah. Thank you, Ndidi. I think I have so many follow-up questions just to that, but I'm going to keep that a little bit to the end because I think you're leading into a good conversation of how we can really evolve and use this as an opportunity to transform agriculture in the Middle East and Africa and to really start ensuring food security. But before that, I really wanted to move to those who represent the private sector. So Hesham, you're the vice chairman of Daltex. Daltex, I want to say, is now one of the largest exporters of potatoes in the world. I think that is correct. I wanted you to talk to me a little bit about how COVID-19 is impacting agriculture in Egypt, and also if you have thoughts about Africa more broadly, but specifically what kind of disruptions are happening within the sector related to the supply chain and also distribution, because this also connects very heavily with what Abeer was talking about in terms of being able to move products around.
Thank you, Dina. I'd like to express, the 2 points that has been raised by Dina and Abeer. are very scary. I mean, the amount of poverty and amount of famines and all of these numbers has been quite scary to anyone hearing them, and it's quite shocking. I mean, I cannot get my mind together to think actually with the question of supply chain. I mean, it's like a luxury we're talking about, even though it's very important in the operation itself. Let me put it this way in short. The structure of supply chain has been affected diversely in the past 6 months. Since the issue happened in China, it has affected the amount of availability of shipping lines, shipping containers to move around the world, because it has been stuck in a lot of the Chinese port. Nobody was wanted to touch any of the products has been sent there. So there were a lot of products that has not been able to move. And the rates of freight rates has been increasing by crazy rates, and it become very expensive. There were no availability of shipping equipment. There was no availability of ships and vessels that actually transport the product from one point to the other. That was the first constraint. Second constraint happened internally within Egypt itself, that some of the blockages we don't have full block in Egypt yet. Yet there is a lot of constraint by the time that the rules of how much movement of trucks and people within the labor in the country itself has been restricted, and by the time that we got involved with the government officials to create the flexibility to let people move around, which is quite hard. I mean, I can tell you that one of the things that has been happening in the past few weeks, yes, we have a lot of respect and admiration to all the medical teams that have been in the field itself of the helping and working and preventing and stopping this disease of spreading and curing the people as much as they can. Also, I would say that for us to move around, we have to move around. We have to go around and be meeting with our own staff or our labor who are moving from one place to the other, mobility of labor to get the product moving and product being transported to the markets that they need. This has been and it has been very, very hard. We managed to adapt. We have been in a few crises in the past few years that we have seen things that may happen, but not at that scale, of course. Usually in food production, in any food production.
His internet was doing well.
You cannot hear me? Hello? Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Yeah. I'm stating that the fact that the transportation is becoming very hard, and the logistics of moving people and moving product and moving, it's becoming quite a nightmare for us in the last number of months, not just the last 4 weeks. Since the China operation happened, because fertilizers and pesticides and products, agricultural inputs come from China into Egypt, has been affected. Moving product from Egypt outside to the global market has been also affected. Internally, the trucking and the blockage that has happened has been also affected. Some organizations, some companies has tried, as you're saying, private sector has tried to make advantage of that, claiming higher costs, which has become very more expensive. A product like potatoes, for example, you're saying that we are the biggest, and we have been hit hard by the potatoes. I mean, as a product, prices of potatoes has dropped dramatically, because mainly potatoes are being produced to service, like food services, like restaurants and catering. And all of that has been stopped. So all the factories of French fries and processed potatoes has been out of business. I mean, in Egypt, there are some factories has been blocked for 3 and 4 weeks. They're not working. In Germany, in Belgium, and Holland, a lot of these factories are out of business, are not working, operating. So the potato, for example, has been gone very, very hard. On the other side, for example, in citrus, which is the vitamin C, a lot of the people who are producing lemons or any oranges or any of this is becoming booming, and prices are going up in the sky. And speculation is happening. The fuel prices dropping in the last few weeks has been helping a bit, but nobody's working on that. So the supply chain components, agriculture inputs, transportation, labor, all of this issue has been quite a challenge to deal with, and has been hard work for us in the last few weeks. We are managing. I cannot say that we're doing a great job, but we're trying very hard, and we expect worse. Actually, we expect things to get worse by time, but we have created contingencies all through the way, all through the process. And if I may just comment on some of the comments that has been given by Ndidi about the involvement of the private sector, let me express that partnerships, we have been working together as exporters in Egypt in the past few weeks, very closely, and growers and farmers, to make sure that the government regulations are helping us to make sure that we're moving the product as quickly as possible. We're now as one, united as one front. Secondly, we have to also include the way we worked with women, because there is a lot of issues happening that a lot of people are out of work, we managed to get very closely to the females and women that are working in rural areas outside the main cities, like in Minya and in Bahira and other governorates in Egypt. We worked very closely to find out where they are, and we tried to provide transportation that they don't have to go through public transportation. We try to make the social distances as much as we can, creating certain, whoever had a problem with even we have what we call gangs of laborers that can go back and forth. We supported them. If anyone is not feeling well, he stayed home. He's fully paid, even he's not fully employed in the company. We made them stay home, fully paid for the job, 2 weeks until they get the quarantine period. We made sure that we trained everyone who was involved, being truckers, even suppliers who were coming into the farms or the packing houses, the factories. We trained them of how to use the best facilities and way to make sure that they don't get contaminated. Yet we try to make sure that they are operating, because we expect to be not some time. So we have to make sure that we have a team that is always working. So we had division of people and separation. We have done a lot of work on that, and we expect things to get a little bit worse, but we have nothing but to just to get all the contingencies and the plans intact, and we just pray to God that things go well. Nothing else we can do.
Right. Thank you, Hesham. Khaled, so your company, Dakahlia, is more focused on the poultry side as opposed to Hesham's company, which is more on the pure agriculture side. What are you seeing within the sector, and what are your thoughts on how it's been impacting your own value chain? And I'd also love for you to also share, as Hesham did, what kind of changes you've made with regards to ensuring that you continue to function, but while at the same time protecting the many, many, many people who work at Daltex.
Well, Dakahlia. Okay, well,
Dakahlia, sorry.
Thank you, Dina. Well, Dina, as you know, agriculture is highly dependent on farm workers, whether it's poultry or farm agriculture. And especially that here in Egypt, we follow a more labor-intensive approach. Now, at the moment, what we are seeing is that the movement of workers is, we can say that it's relatively easy. The possibility to move workers, there are no major challenges there. There are some challenges, of course, and incidents here and there. However, you have to take into account the reality that today there are risks to the health of these workers. So besides the quick, we've had to adapt quickly to the safety requirements. So besides obvious things like sanitation and physical distancing and so on, we've also taken steps to try to keep the workers on the farm. Now, that way, of course, they stay on the farms instead of going back and forth to their towns and villages. So that way they're basically isolating themselves and minimizing contact, which is essentially not unlike how medical workers are isolating in hotels. And so that, they'd stay away from others and families and so on, and you minimize the contact. That is one thing that we have been doing. Now, that's basically talking about us as far as workers. Now, however, you cannot say that this, I don't know anyone personally who has told me this, but we have been reading reports that in the European Union, we have been hearing about farmers, migrant farmers in particular, for labor-intensive crops such as strawberries in Spain or whatever, that they have been unable to get their requirements of workers. Now, we've also heard stories about, that's not just in the European Union, but we've heard stories about packing houses in South Africa being operational at a fraction of their capacity for the same reason. Workers are afraid to go to the packing houses. That is as far as the workers or the issue of workers is concerned. Now, as for the ability to export, Hesham has already talked about the issues that we've had with the fresh produce, the container terminals in China shutting down, volatility in air freight and so on. As far as the major input in poultry, which is grains, I can confidently say that at the moment it's pretty stable. We have not seen any major issues there. The major grain vessels are traveling easily. The inland transport in the major producing countries such as the United States, Brazil, Argentina, the Black Sea region, we can see that the movement is pretty smooth. If it's not, we would see it reflected on the premium over the futures contract prices, which we have not seen so far, except for one maybe small disruption in Argentina, but that was due to a truck driver strike. So that is essentially what we have seen. So at the moment, I can say that the disruptions that we are seeing disruptions, but they're not major disruptions yet. That being said, we don't know what the future holds for us. Now, as far as the point that Ndidi raised about the company stepping up, what we have been doing, if I speak about the poultry sector, the poultry business is actually very familiar and very well versed in viral diseases. Basically, a very big part of successfully raising poultry is very strong biosecurity. Now, we have had very strong biosecurity setups for a very long time. We learned that the hard way in 2005 after the avian influenza arrived in Egypt. And since then, as the disease became endemic in Egypt, we had to learn how to adapt. And that's just one disease among many diseases that have arrived since then. So we actually know very well about isolating people, about disinfecting farms, about disinfecting facilities, and about controlling the movement of people in order to make sure not to infect farms. However, obviously, that's just, I'm not meaning to make an analogy here, because obviously the life of human beings is far more critical and far more important than the value of the lives of birds. Now, we have had, one of the things that we have been doing around us is actually using that expertise to try to benefit others. So for example, we have had the same teams that have been disinfecting our farms. We have been sending these out to help to assist with the efforts to disinfect public buildings. So far we have disinfected a lot of public buildings.
Our willingness to see cooperatives evolve as a way forward and as a strong way to bring smallholder farmers together.
Well, I've always been a major proponent of agriculture. No pandemic. But obviously, as you said, hopefully people should, small farmers should realize that basically, well, the first thing they should realize is that they are stronger together. That's the first thing they should be realizing. That said, they alone cannot they cannot help themselves without some kind of facilitator or coordinator to help. And these cooperatives, hopefully they will help improve the operational performance of small farmers, reduce waste, help facilitate exchange of know-how, and ultimately increase financial return and resilience in the face of problems, such as the problem that we are facing, such as this catastrophe that we are facing at the moment. Obviously, as Hesham said earlier, before we started, there are already such initiatives, such as the Society, the Exporters Association that he is on the board of. That's actually one of the biggest success stories that we have in Egypt. However, we would like to see that experience emulated elsewhere among small farmers, so that hopefully they are, as I said, they can improve their performance and become more resilient in the future.
Great. I have a personal, hope that cooperatives will start emerging in a much stronger fashion across Africa. Mohsen, the Egyptian Food Bank, and I did keep you last for a reason, because I think you're a prime example of someone who is really trying to support food security in a country through the Egyptian Food Bank, but you're also extremely dependent on agriculture companies and their ability to produce food, and supply chains and distribution channels, in your ability to do that. Egypt has seen what you say are 5 million daily workers who are no longer able to sustain themselves since the COVID crisis started. Can you tell us a little bit about what the Egyptian Food Bank has been doing, but also specifically, you know, as the main food bank that is providing support to poor families and people in Egypt, what are your aspirations for the kind of role that the private sector should be playing outside of donations? Because I know you did a CEO challenge, but outside of donations, what would you like to see in terms of the agriculture working with you more closely, and what innovations would you like to see emerge?
Okay, that question has multiple facets. Okay, let me start with what the food bank is doing right now, and what the food bank has been doing for the past 15 years. So for the past 15 years, we've been taking care of Egyptians under the extreme and the ultra poverty lines. These are the global standards of $1.25 per person per day, and sometimes debatable ultra poverty line of $0.7 per person per day. So I've been shipping out food subsidies to between 125,000 to 150,000 Egyptians each and every month. That's in addition to a school feeding program we've been implementing in around 25 public schools. So I've been producing between 40 to 50,000 meals a day during the school years. So these sectors of Egyptians we were historically serving. So these people, yes, they are vulnerable, and yes, they need assistance. But again, they are deeply connected to social safety nets. The government has established in Egypt, for example, the Kafel and Karama programs, the conditional cash transfer and the unconditional cash transfer programs, the Tadamun pension, the food, the bread subsidy, so on and so forth. But the bigger problem is in the sector of Egyptians that previously were very well off. They would go to the market each and every day and come back home with 80 pounds, 100 pounds. They would get a good meal for their children. They would save very little for school fees. And these people are not connected to any social safety nets by the government. So when COVID struck the whole planet, these people's lives were put to halt suddenly, and they really don't have any savings for a rainy day. Not because they're reckless, but because their lifestyle just doesn't allow for any savings to accumulate. So these people, we still have the 125 to 150,000 people under the extreme poverty lines that we have to take care of. But now we have 5 million more. So actually, it's pretty tough. Again, at the food bank, we're under tremendous pressure. We're having to operate 24-hour shifts. So we're operating 3 shifts a day, the food bank factory, and that's around 150 to 170 workers. So we are fighting wars on 2 fronts. You're fighting an invisible enemy that's trying to attack your people who have to go out each day and work to put value in the lives of other people. So trying to protect your workers as much as you can, and on the other front, you're trying to put value to the lives of millions of Egyptians who cannot now afford their most basic needs. So it's pretty tough. But until now, I think we've accomplished a lot, and we've accomplished a lot because the amount of generosity and solidarity that has been shown in the Egyptian society is unprecedented. I've never seen it. I've been working in the nonprofit sector for the past 10 years, and even when I was working in the private sector, what I have seen in that past month, it's miraculous. So we've started the first phase of the campaign, and we've shipped out around 500,000 packs of food in the past, I think, 28 days. And I think we've financed, I'll talk about money first, and then I will talk about other modes of assistance that the private sector has been very crucial in. So we've been able to finance maybe 30 to 40% of the campaign in the first 3-4 days. And I think it was 17 days we financed the first phase of the campaign, which prompted us only yesterday to launch an extension that will be shipping an additional 1 million packs during Ramadan. So the private sector,
I think we lost Mohsen.
of course,
There we are.
maybe 50% of the campaign. Okay. So the private sector, I think, financed maybe 50% of the campaign, mainly through the CEO challenge. But now we're discovering more modes to cooperate beyond cash. So now I've been talking with a certain company for ride hailing, and they will give us, for example, buses where we can transport workers to their homes, because now we have to reduce the number of workers who go to the factory and back to their homes in our buses. So, for example, a bus carries 30 to 40 workers. Now we're working with half that to ensure proper social distancing. So they will give us the additional buses. Another company, for example, our call centers and our social media channels are basically being overrun. So you have a certain number of agents who you used to handle a certain capacity, and now they have like tens of thousands of calls each and every day from people who are impacted by the current situation. And also our social media channels. We have our moderation team to answer questions to the public. Now they're getting like 100,000 requests a day. So it's pretty overwhelming. So we've launched an online portal. So a company has donated to build that online portal using Salesforce, which is one of the leading CRM systems globally. And they launched it maybe, they put it online, and I think it was less than 48 hours, maybe 45 hours. They put that portal online where people can go and register requests for assistance, individuals or even nonprofit institutions. They can register themselves, and then we can allocate services to them.
Mohsen?
Yep.
Oh, sorry. I thought you got cut off.
Yeah.
I was just hoping that you could just quickly, very, very quickly, just tell the audience how everyone, just very quickly, how everyone can get engaged with the Egyptian Food Bank. And if there's, for those who even can't donate, what could they do to support? Because what you described is also a major, what looks like what will keep turning into a major crisis for Egypt until we can get everyone back to work again. And, I know that Abeer and the World Food Program are working very hard, but this also needs to be something that we all take on as local citizens as well. And I imagine countries across Africa are facing the same problem, but at least in Egypt, what can any citizen who can support do? And then, I'll ask you to be very brief. We have some questions from the audience.
Okay, I think one of the best things to do now is to pray for that this thing just leaves us as soon as possible. I'm not Egyptians, of course, I do not want to use that for fundraising, but I'm open to any ideas for streamlining service delivery. For example, I've launched that portal. If someone wants to step up, like a startup that has unique technology that can make us reach people faster or can make people connect with us faster, please step up. This will be more valuable even than money at that point. To the World Food Program, I'm thinking now of borrowing one of your programs for the restricted food basket, because that time even small retailers are heavily suffering. So I want to choose some areas and start adopting some cash transfer model where affected population can take that transfer and go buy from the small retailers on restricted or unrestricted food basket modes. But I think I would need a lot of technical assistance from the World Food Program.
That's wonderful, Mohsen. That's a great way to open up the discussion for some of the questions that came in, but I love the way you just opened up how civil society can really partner with the private sector and startups, but also with UN agencies as well. So we do have some questions from the audience, and I know we're running short on time. Mustafa Ghali, very early on, asked a question of how do you think digital technology can help, and are there any clear gaps or opportunities to tackle key pains from your view? Ndidi, do you want to take this question?
Sure, happy to. I think first, digital technology can play a role in increasing precision agriculture, enabling us to double and triple our yields, and also reduce post-harvest losses. We also need to leverage data. You know, I just love the stories from Egypt. I'm really inspired by all the work you're doing. And I just imagine that so many other African entrepreneurs would benefit from even hearing about the work of the Egyptian Food Bank. We're not leveraging our case studies, our data, and spreading this knowledge around. And I don't know if Ahead of the Curve can partner with Nourishing Africa, but I'm throwing it out there as an opportunity because we can leapfrog, leveraging each other's best practices and experiences and learning from mistakes as well. And technology can help us do that in exponential ways. So I'd love to see that. And then the final point is really around how we empower our governments with data. Many of our governments are still really inefficient. I like that Egypt is doing a lot with the most vulnerable populations, but in many other African countries, we don't even know where they are. We don't know how to find them. And I think we'll need more e-government solutions and engagement with the financial sector to really register even the poorest of the poorest farmers, but also individuals across the divide. And so I'd love to see us leveraging technology to do that.
Great. We have a question from Diane Shoemaker in the US. She says, in the US, 11% of the population was considered to be food insecure, with a 4% unemployment in 2018, 37 million food insecure. Now the estimate for unemployment in the US is expected to reach 18% this year, greatly increasing food security in the US. How do you think Egypt can partner with the US for a win-win? Any takers for that question? Abeer, you took your mic off.
Yeah, I was thinking about it that I think lots of countries, no matter where the economic status is, how much money these governments have different ways to support the most vulnerable. But I think the real, I'm really amazed by the experiences of some of the of some countries like Egypt, like Jordan, like many countries in Africa, where they have established these very strong safety net programs to support the most vulnerable, especially during the time of crisis. And just to give you an example, in the last few weeks, the Egyptian Ministry of Labor have started providing some safety nets to casual laborers who have lost their jobs. So I think that there are, while the US is one of the largest economies in the world, but there are definitely lessons learned from the countries that are whose economies, are not as strong and have high rates of poverty, because they're very, very well experienced in how they deal with the most vulnerable and the people who fall through the gaps by using these safety net programs. So your question is really right, spot on.
Yep. We have a question from Adel Bousili. Should we expect the drop in oil prices to affect the supply chain positively by decreasing logistics costs and making food more accessible and affordable? I'm assuming that this question is for Khaled or Hesham.
If I make
or even Ndidi.
I do believe that this is a impact. I hope that this fuel drop prices will improve the cost of logistics globally, and I'm looking forward for that. And the way that we have to look into it, that we have to find means to provide an affordable price. I totally agree with Didi about the fact that we should not be taking advantage. I don't believe this is the right time to be opportunistic. Private sectors are being accused, being true, idealistic. time like this, it's our job and it's our job. It's our main purpose of existence, and to continue.
Hesham, you're cutting up. Do you want to turn your mic off?
I'll turn on, actually. Well,
I mean, turn your video off.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay. What I'm trying to say here is that we have moved from the fact that we're being opportunistic here, as private being labeled, whatever the label is. I'm not going to argue that label now. Our purpose that we have to find solidarity, because we will not find consumers in the future to serve. If we are not able to get those people on a level of existence, on a minimum level of existence, and being well respected and well looked, we will not find our customers in the future. So if we think it's the right time to increase prices, increase costs at the wrong time, that's absolutely wrong time. That's number one. Number two, cost of fuel, distribution, logistics. We are currently under a lot of burden that some of these organizations or shipping companies are trying to take advantage. We also hope that they can see the same issue, that this is the only sector that is moving. The only area that people are using trucks, it's agriculture and food industry. If they don't see that, if the whole business shrunk to only food, then they want to make the same amount of money they used to do by doing whatever they were transporting. This is a very short-sighted way of looking into it. So the fuel prices should improve our cost. And we have been discussing in the last 2-3 days with our shipping companies and trucking companies to weigh this cost cheaper. And some of them have been listening, I would say that. We haven't seen the action yet. They're all claiming that they have to go back to their boards and their companies to get back to this on track. I hope that they listen, because when the congestion happened in China, they doubled the costs. When they had when there was a shortage of equipment, cost was doubled to destinations that were very close. And this is what a very difficult situation, but hopefully they will put their act together and understand. And we are, from our side, we have been with a lot of those costs going up, and our chances to make money is looking very nicely today, for example, in a product like citrus. But I don't believe this is the right way. I believe that we have to be in solidarity to make sure that the providers are the lowest and the most needy structure in any country within Africa or Egypt itself.
Yeah, Hesham. I know we're running short on time, so I won't be able to I don't think time to answer everybody's questions. But there are a number of questions that are very much related to the future and what is next. May and Nawi, H.Sherif, a couple of others have asked questions related to how can we start safeguarding our supply chains and ensuring that we have a much more inclusive and sustainable food security strategy moving forward. I would like these are some of the things that have been popping up. I would love it if each of you could wrap up and give your thoughts on what is the silver lining in all of this when it comes to food security and agriculture? What could we, if we were to really look at this as an opportunity to transform the sector and to actually achieve food security in the Middle East and Africa? What would be your thoughts, and how can we use everything that is happening now as an opportunity to innovate and to transform the system as it is now, which is clearly not providing the kind of security we need in the Middle East and Africa? And I'll just go around and ask you to wrap up with that question. I'll reverse this time. I'll start with Khaled.
Well, you're not doing it, Dina, in such a difficult time, and it's such a tragic time. It's difficult to find the silver lining. However, I think that we'll come stronger out of it, and hopefully we should come out with a new perspective. I believe one of the good things to come out of this tragedy is the fact that there is a lot of appreciation in general for frontline workers, and among them, agricultural workers. I think if we want to take food security seriously, then we need to understand that there are no easy solutions. It's never going to be as simple as throwing money at the problem as building bigger stocks, as building, some extra buildings and facilities. There is a lot of investment that needs to go into different things. A country like Egypt, for example, if we want to achieve better food security, we're going to have to invest in the know-how of breeding grounds, for example, and breed new varieties for our weather, for our climate, to increase our yield. That is the first thing. We're going to actually have to take we mentioned the agricultural cooperatives, we have to take that seriously. Just two small examples among a lot of things that we need to take seriously. But the most important thing is that the policymakers need to understand it's never going to be as simple as throwing money at the problem, just making one or two decisions here and there. It needs to be a long-term strategy. We have to remember them, and we don't forget them. Hopefully,
do you think that this
subsides.
crisis will push countries like Egypt to become a lot more self-sufficient when it comes to agriculture and food security?
One can only hope. I mean, I hope that they do. I certainly believe that some of the policymakers will be listening, but ultimately taking action, that's up to the people, to the decision makers everywhere. So hopefully they remember these lessons and they take action. That's one can only hope.
Ndidi? And I'm hoping you say that entrepreneurship and innovation is our only savior.
Definitely. That's what I was going to say. I think we recognize that SMEs are the bedrock and the engine of growth in every society, and they need to be adopting digital technology, innovation in the way they work, and they need to build more resilient business models. But given that we have an mostly Egyptian audience, I'd also like to see that we learn that the borders that unite us mean that we have to work together as a region. I would like to see Africa becoming more food self-sufficient. I think that every country has what it takes, but we have core competencies that are slightly different, and would love to see us, working across borders, increasing our trade, increasing our collaboration, knowledge sharing, and best practices. I really have a lot to learn from Egypt, and I'm sure everybody here also has a lot to learn from other countries in Africa, and so we need to do more together.
Yep.
So I'd like to see that. And I think we can, this is just the beginning, but I'm thrilled that you've brought us together, and I think we can do a lot more going forward.
I completely agree. Hesham?
If I may answer to this, to put two sections there. First part is that I do believe that the silver lining is that we have created a structure. We are able to work closely together, and we were able to find ways and means to be more agile and more flexible to get the job done, and make products and make creating jobs to where it is not existing. And I'm very optimistic, by the way, I don't think it's only the self-sufficiency is the issue, but also because people will understand the resources that we have to build on them. And whatever resources we have to make sure that we use them well, and we understand that our limitations are only our dreams. So we can create more and can do a lot more than we actually believe we can. I mean, it has gone people together. And I don't believe that, and I'm really totally against the idea that countries are for themselves now. I'm really concerned about that. I mean, people saying being self-sufficient, people trying to make their own product that they don't want to ship it outside and keep their own product to themselves. I still believe that we have to work on core competence. Each country and each individual company has core competence which they can work on, and they can provide product and they can provide services to other countries and vice versa. If we only think about ourselves as a country in Egypt and we say, okay, we're going to grow our own grains, we're going to grow our own products, and we don't export anything, and we keep our product to ourselves to be safe, I believe that we have a product that people need, and there are products in other countries that we need. And we have to work on ways to make this trade working. I don't believe that the right thing is to keep ourselves together and close our doors and say, think about ourselves only. I don't think this is the right approach, even though there are a lot of countries that are taking action, because like within the EU itself, each country is doing its own directions and their own way, and it's becoming more nationalistic. I'm very much against that. Maybe I'm being idealistic, and I think we should be very much pro letting ourselves work on the best product that we have and the best qualities that we have as a country and as a individuals, and give as much as possible from our sides to others, and maintain that sustainability and the sustainability of existence of ourselves and people around us. Thank you.
Thank you, Hesham. Mohsen?
So today morning, I was on a virtual press conference via Zoom, and now we're having that meeting. I think this is a clear indication. If we didn't have these preparedness on the digital infrastructure, I wonder what COVID would have actually impacted us with. And at least we're prepared digitally. I think digital is the key forward, at least to our sector, the nonprofit sector. I think we have to move more into big data analytics, and I think we have to really understand what works best for our people, and we have to rethink deeply our evaluation methods that are still based on surveys. I think that's the future of our sector, and that's how we'll be able to be better prepared when something like this comes again. I think the key is digital, and I think the key is entrepreneurship and capturing small ideas and prototyping them and turning them into workable business models. Yeah.
Could not agree more. Abeer, are you going to take us home with the final remarks?
Okay, I think most of the big strategic points have been really addressed and addressed well by the experts. But for me and for the many of the people who work in the humanitarian sector, we have an important mission to do. We've got 250,000 people who are going to be suffering from severe food insecurity. These people don't have access to internet innovations. Yes, we need the innovations, but we need to save their lives first. And to do that, the World Food Programme, as part of the UN Joint Global Humanitarian Appeal, is setting up vital logistics backbone that will help hopefully save lives. These services will provide on behalf not just of the World Food Programme, but on behalf of the whole humanitarian global community. And that does not include only the UN, but they include NGOs. It will enable this swift and efficient response to COVID-19 so that we protect the most vulnerable people and the poorest of the poor. Any delay in this kind of action will undermine the global efforts to bring the pandemic under control and to make sure that people are not being pushed into hunger. So there will be establishing and equipping and managing international consolidation hubs and regional staging areas, air and shipping cargo services, passenger. With the closure of the airspace, we will have to start operating passenger air services to allow workers, humanitarian and aid workers, to travel from one place to the other to save lives. This is what we need immediately, is the saving lives element. And then from these crises, usually the best ideas and innovations will come. At the end of the day, need is the mother of all inventions. And I think that will come out stronger, hopefully, after we've saved lives during this very difficult time.
Thank you, Abeer. And I know we're out of time, so I just wanted to thank each of you. It's late at night for all of you. I'm stuck in the United States, so it's still the middle of my day, but I wanted to thank all of you for joining this late. And I personally, I've learned a lot from each and every one of you during this session. I hope the audience has as well. Mohsen, thank you for continuing to serve the people of Egypt, and and also all of you for all of your hard work. And I just wanted to wrap up by saying that I do hope that we as a continent, Middle East and Africa, can start collaborating a lot more closely, like Ndidi said, when it comes to this particular topic of food security and agriculture. And I really do hope that one day, Abeer, we don't need the World Food Programme to be providing that kind of humanitarian relief, because I do believe we have the resources and the means and hopefully the technology that would allow everyone to have access to the food that they need to be nourished. So thank you all, and thank you to the audience. Please stay tuned. We will be having another session coming up next week on social protection. And to those of us who have family members in the audience, like my mom and Khaled's sister, Islam, thank you also for attending and supporting. And hopefully we'll see you again next week. Oh wait, Hesham, what were you saying? Do you have 2 family members attending?
Yeah, I haven't seen two family members attending, and I haven't seen them for quite a while now.
Are those your sons?
Yeah, both of them are online.
Oh, that's amazing. Hi, Ibrahim and Mahmoud. I know they're also stuck here in the United States. So again, thank you guys. Thank you, everybody. This is such an important topic. We do really need to continue talking more about it. So good night to all of you, and thank you to the participants.
Thank you very much, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Enjoy.
Thank you, Dina. Bye.